Hi everyone, Chad here. Today we're going to pack this 14 centimeter wide Axichrom column. I happen to be lucky enough to have this Phenyl HP resin from a different project that I'll be allowed to use here. Now, these columns can cost tens of thousands of dollars to pack, so this video is strictly for demonstration purposes. Your institution likely has specific procedures about how to pack them, so I recommend you follow those. So let's get started. Ultimately, we're looking to get a stable resin bed that basically stays in one place while we're running the column. During the pack, we don't want to get any air inside the bed, and we want very little to no resin on top of the adapter head. We also want to obtain an even distribution of different sized beads. I'll show you guys what I'm talking about here in a second. A few other things we need to do is calculate the cross-sectional area of the column and figure out what flow rate we're going to use. So these are some of the parts of the column, and I'm really just leaving this here as a reference. Alright, so it's important to obtain an even distribution of resin inside the packed bed. This helps us optimize the best performance of the column. So for example, Phenyl HP has a mean particle size of 34 microns, but that doesn't mean all of the beads are 34 microns. There's actually distribution, and the beads can range in size from 24 microns to 44 microns. So you have a bead slurry here, and everything's floating around. But if you let everything gravity settle, of course, larger beads are going to settle on the bottom first, and then smaller beads will settle on the top. Really, this is kind of an exaggerated example, but we can get much better performance if we actively settle the beads by either flow or by pushing down on the beads with the adapter. This really isn't too big of a deal, but it's important enough that we want to pay attention to it. Just like some of the other columns that we packed, we don't want to get any air trapped at the underneath the adapter. So the first thing we're going to do is wait for the resin to settle by gravity. I usually wait for it to settle for about 60 minutes, and what we're looking for is to be able to see to the far side of the column, after it's settled for a little bit. I know I said letting some of the resin settle by gravity isn't ideal, but really here we need a compromise because we don't want to get any air inside the resin. The first thing we have to do is put the adapter into the column, and we do this by tipping it at an angle, lowering the adapter down so that the adapter head is resting on the bevel. Then we'll tip it up, and of course it's going to make a huge mess with water going everywhere, but that's fine. If you're not making a mess, you're doing something wrong. It's also important to point out to pay attention to what you're doing, because you really only get one shot here before you have to re-slurry the resin and start all over again. So once we have the adapter fitted on top of the column, there are two ways we can pack it. The first one is hydraulic packing, and that's where we just push the top adapter down onto the column until the adapter comes in contact with the resin bed. But when we do this, we're very confident about the flow rate we're going to use and the pressure of that flow rate while it's running, the percent slurry of the bed, and the bed height. We only really do this under well-studied conditions. So the other option is to flow pack the column, and really what we do here is we measure how far the resin is going to go down under the given flow conditions, and then we mark the position, and then we put the adapter on top of the resin. And this is really helpful to do when you're packing the column for the first time. So I've shown in my other videos that columns can be packed in a variety of solutions. Fully equilibrating the resin into the desired solution will ensure a consistent and stable resin bed. Today, I prefer the resin to be in water or buffer, but I don't have a lot of time for this demo, so I'm going to start by pouring off the 20% ethanol storage solution and adding water before I shake the bottles to re-slurry them. This way, the resin should settle a little faster. Of course, I don't have a specific target for this column because it's a demo, but I think I'd like to get a 12 centimeter high column, which would be about 2 liters in volume. Using the graduations on the side of the bottles, I know I'm going to use about a bottle and a half. Let's go over how we do the calculation next. Let me demonstrate how you accurately measure the slurry of a resin. To start, the day before we pack the column, we're going to shake up our bottle of resin to slurry it, then pour just a little bit into a graduated cylinder. I'm shooting for about 20 mils here, but the exact number doesn't matter. I'll just be dividing one number by another. Of course, in the last scene, I didn't do any of this because the bottle already has graduations that are usually pretty good. Plus, I didn't know I was going to be doing this pack until about an hour before I had the opportunity. So, if you want an accurate measurement, use the graduated cylinder approach. The next day, we found that our bed settled to 15 mils with the stored solution at 20 mils. One of the things we haven't done so far is to figure out how fast we're going to run the column. So we'll look in the instruction booklet and find a recommended flow rate, which is a linear flow rate. The flow rate is expressed this way because the OEM doesn't know how wide of a column we're packing. We'll have to convert the linear flow rate into a volumetric flow rate. We're also going to need to know the cross-sectional area of the column, or volume, in mils of just 1 centimeter of height. So the radius, 7 centimeters squared, times pi, or 154 mils. So now let's do a linear to volumetric flow rate calculation. That's what YouTube is all about, right? We'll multiply 100 centimeters an hour by the cross-sectional area, 154 mils per centimeter. Then we're going to divide that by the number of minutes in an hour, 60, which will give us about 256 mils per minute. For other columns, for example this one, which is 2.6 centimeters wide, we would end up with a volumetric flow rate of 8.8 mils a minute. And for a really small column that's 0.5 centimeters wide, we would have 0.33 mils per minute. But all these columns running at these volumetric flow rates would have a linear flow rate of 100 centimeters an hour. The reason we do this in chromatography is residence time doesn't change regardless of the size of the column as we scale up to make more stuff per run or down to do some kind of research. Alright, we finally get to actually start packing the column now. We're gonna remove these hex nuts first so we can pull the entire top adapter out of the column. It's a really tight fit, so you kind of have to wiggle it a little bit, but it'll come out. Alright, the next thing we need to do is attach the column to the chromatography skid. I am going to be using this tri-clamp 2 5/16 inch adapter to do that today. When we turn on the chromatography skid, we're going to purge all of the air out of the bottom adapter, which gives you this really kind of cool bubbling effect as the water goes up through the adapter for the first time. With a lower adapter purged of air, we can pour the slurried resin into the column. I'm aiming to pour it down the side to prevent air bubbles from mixing into the viscous slurry that's already at the bottom. I'm looking to get a packed bed of about 12 centimeters high for this. To find out how much resin to pour into the column, I multiplied 12 times the cross-sectional area, 154 mils per centimeter, which would be a volume of about 1848 mils. I plan to crush the beds about 10%, so I'm going to take that 1848 and multiply it by 1.1 to get 2032. Earlier, I figured out that I had a 75% slurry, so I will divide 2032 by 75% to find out that I need 2,710 mils in total to pack this column. The graduations on the side of the bottle are good enough to measure out how much I need in this case, at least good enough for this demonstration. I decided to rinse the bottle that I completely emptied with a little bit of water so I can get every last bit of resin out of it. I'm going to finish by filling the column with just plain water all the way to the top. I don't have to worry about stirring the column to get a completely uniform slurry, because the simple act of pouring the water in, for the most part, appears to be mixing the slurry enough for me. I want to fill the body of the column up with as much water as I possibly can, so when I put the top adapter in, it is less likely that air will get trapped underneath the adapter. This is what the column looks like from another angle, just after I've completely filled it with water. You can see that the resin is completely blocking my view to the other side. We need enough room to fit the top adapter into the column, so this is where we're going to let the resin settle for about an hour. Now, after an hour of settling, this is what the resin bed looks like, and it's pretty easy to see through to the other side. Next, I'm going to prime the top adapter with water. I'll hook it up to the chromatography system using this tri-clamp and 5/16 adapter. Normally, you want to hold the top adapter upside down so air will properly be displaced, but there's only one of me right now, so I guess I'm going to do it sideways, resting on the cart here. It's really hard to hold the top adapter, film, and turn on the pilot all at once. I thought maybe I could hold it upside down in frame for a second there, but it really didn't work out. Time to go get a mop, I guess. Now for the real action. It's time to insert the top adapter at an angle into the column, smooth and steady, just like we've been talking about. We're trying to keep any air from getting it trapped under the adapter, and likewise keep any resin out of the hydraulic chamber. I think this looks pretty good. So I'll lower the plate down on top of the flange, line up the notches, and secure the hex nuts using an 8mm wrench. The next step is to hook up the chromatography system to the hydraulic chamber so that you can lower the adapter. The adapter has to be lowered below the bevel so you can get a tight seal and start running the column. Before you start lowering the adapter though, be sure to check your setup. The water in the column has to have somewhere to go. Here is a diagram of the configuration I'm using for this pack. I have water entering into the hydraulic chamber, and then the outlet is at the bottom of the column, which is open and going to waste. Everything else is sealed off. Today, I'm going to lower the adapter to 20 centimeters. It is very important also to set a pressure alarm. With Axichrom, normally I set the pressure alarm to 0.5 megapascals. Once the adapter is at 20 centimeters, I'll reconfigure the column and chromatography system again so that I can start to flow pack the column. When running through the column like this, the hydraulic chamber needs to be sealed off. Check your setup carefully and set the pressure alarm. Here, I'm going to run at the operational flow rate that we calculated earlier, which is 256 mils a minute. I'm just going to wait until I have a nicely settled resin bed with no more slurry floating around the top of the column. Usually I'll run the column for at least an hour while flow packing this way. When the bed has finally settled and while it's still running, I'll mark the spot where the bed has settled to. We'll reconfigure the column to lower the adapter just one more time to the spot that I marked. To finish the pack, I'm going to lower the adapter 1 centimeter past the mark to crush the resin a little bit, which will give me a good, stable pack. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. It certainly isn't meant to be a comprehensive guide for packing a larger column, but I think it'll get the job done. We use the pilot chromatography system to do this pack, which is a system I haven't gone over yet, but I hope to one day. In the meantime, good luck with your purifications.